So on we go with our next type of reading question. And this is called a question and proof in one. So instead of being a set of two questions, we have a question that's combined with a proof in one question. And our sample question is going to be number 23. So turn to number 23, and it reads, a student claims that nitrogenous bases pair randomly with one another. Which of the following statements in the passage contradicts the student's claim? And you can see there are proofs in the answers. So the strategy is a little bit different on this one. Before, when it was a separate question for the proofs, I said only go from the word that they tell you it starts with to the word that they tell you it ends with, and don't read around it. But for a question like this, you do want to read around it. So definitely get the full context. Okay, so let's go through it. So we want a contradiction to pairs, to bases pairing randomly. Okay, so we want a contradiction to random pairing. See, I try to shortcut it in my own mind so I don't have to hold too much information. Okay, so we go to line 5 and 6, and it says, to each sugar is attached a nitrogenous base, which can be of 4 different types. Now I ask myself, is that proof that these bases are pairing randomly? And I look back, and it says, doesn't say how they're paired. It just says that they're paired to a sugar. And there can be different types, but it doesn't say whether the pairing is random or not. So I don't like that one. I'm going to cross that one out. Lines 9 to 10, from so far to irregular. So far as is known, the sequence of bases along the chain is irregular. The monomer unit, I'm reading on, consisting of phosphate, sugar, and base is known as nucleotide. It does say the sequence of bases is irregular. So, I don't know, maybe, but it doesn't really say that it's pairing with something. So, I don't know. I don't feel convinced about that one. I'm going to cross that one out. Let's go to 23 to 25, the bases. Okay, that says the bases are joined together in pairs. A single base from one chain being hydrogen bonded to a single base from the other. Okay, now I ask myself, is that a contradiction of bases pairing randomly? And maybe, I think I'm going to leave that. It's saying, it doesn't seem random, so yeah, I think I like that one. Okay, and 27 to 29, one member. 27, one member of a pair must be a purine and the other a pyrimidine in order to bridge between the two chains. Well, I like that one too because it's very specific. It's saying one pair must be that, another pair must be this other thing. So now it's just between C and D, and which one most contradicts the student's statement that nitrogenous bases pair randomly. I go back, 23 to 25, they're joined together in pairs. A single base from one being hydrogen bonded to a single base from another. I don't know, I think it's pretty good, but I'm liking it now, reading it a little bit less, because it's saying that they're joined in pairs. I don't know. I'm having a hard time with this. I can't quite tell. So I'm going to go back to the other one, 27 to 29, and hopefully I like it better. One member must be a purine, the other a pyrimidine. You know, I think I'm going to go with that one because it's so specific. And I'm not 100% sure, but maybe I'm 75% sure. Or even 60% sure I'd still go with D. Okay, that's the process. And of course, D is the right answer. I didn't actually need to read around the proof on these. Sometimes the questions are too vague, or the proofs are too vague, And so you need to read for context. But I think these were pretty clear. That's why I mostly didn't read around it. Anyway, that's the only question and proof in one on this test. So that's the only one we're doing. Basically, I want to remind you on these questions to find a key phrase. Always find a key phrase in the question so that you can keep that in your head as you're asking yourself, is this proof of this thing? Okay, let's move on to the next kind of question. And that is it's kind of a combination of main idea, summary, purpose, primary purpose, right? Any kind of overarching question like that, that's the last section we're going to study on this video. There are a few more types of questions. Don't get too excited yet. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is number 1. We go all the way back to the beginning, and you'll see it is a very overarching question that says, which choice best describes what happens in the passage? I mean, it doesn't get more general than that. So this requires that you have read it and basically understood it. Now, it's very possible that you can get a question like this right up at the top and you didn't really understand the passage, in which case I would advise you to not do the question or at least come back to the question after you've answered all the other questions, because once you answer 9 or 10 more questions, you'll probably have a better idea of what's happening in the passage. And then you can go back and say, oh, I think I have a general idea, enough so to answer the question. But we're going to go right here, right now. So what happens? We have already answered some questions. We know that this guy Akira comes knocking on the door. He is talking to Chi, who apparently is the mother. I also want to tell you something that I had forgotten to tell you. Right up at the top of the page, I don't know if you can see this, there's a header, right? It says passage 1 or questions 1, it'll say like questions 1 through 10 are based on the following passage. And then right under that, there's a little header that describes the year maybe it was written, who wrote it, and possibly a very important little summary. I suggest that you read that because it can kind of orient you to the passage right off the bat. Okay, so we know that he is approaching this woman, Chi, and he's saying he's very polite. We know that he has he's pressed for time, and he just got an offer for a job as a dentist in Seattle. We know they're Japanese. Oh yeah, right, there was another question that asks about him being afraid to be judged by her. Okay, so what happens? Let's look at the answers and see, just based on that, if we can even answer this question. A says one character argues with another, and I'm just going to stop right there and say there's no arguing here. Cross it out. Okay, it can go as quick as that. As soon as you see something wrong, get rid of the answer. B says one character receives a surprising request from another character. I don't know, maybe. I'm just going to leave that in. I think that's a maybe. C, one character reminisces about choices she has made. That doesn't seem right. I don't think that is good. Now, we haven't discussed anything about that, so I'm going to get rid of C. And then D, one character criticizes another character for pursuing an unexpected course of action. And again, there's no criticism here. So we have our answer, B. And even if we weren't sure of B, we know it's not A, C, or D. So B is the only one left. Good enough. We move on. And actually, it turns out number 2 is another kind of general question. So we'll go right on to that. And this one says, which choice best describes the developmental pattern of the passage? It's a kind of an unusually worded question, and I wouldn't worry too much about that wording. Let's just look and see if we can figure it out based on what we don't like. All right, A says, a careful analysis of a traditional practice. Now, remember in the beginning, he had said he broke tradition. So I don't think this is the pattern of the whole passage to analyze the traditional practice. We can get rid of A. B, a detailed depiction of a meaningful encounter. Well, I think it's kind of detailed, and I don't know, maybe it's meaningful. I think it's good enough to leave. I'm not positive of it, but let's just leave it. C says a definitive response to a series of questions. I don't really think there's a series of questions. There is a question up front, but I don't think it's a series of questions, so we'll get rid of C. And D, a cheerful recounting of an amusing anecdote. I don't really see there's anything amusing in this passage, so again, here we go. B is the only one left. I wasn't positive of it, but A, C, and D aren't good, so there it is. We have another answer, B. All right, you see how this goes? You don't have to know. You just have to be clear about what doesn't work. All right, let us move forward to number 7. Same passage. Okay, this is a lot of general questions for one passage. There's not usually so many. Number 7 reads the main purpose of the first paragraph. And we had already read the first paragraph, but we're going to go back there and read it again because, of course, we don't do anything from memory. I shall read. Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form? Had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between? Would she have been more receptive? All right, we go back to question 7. The main purpose of the first paragraph. Now, I have to tell you, whenever you see the main purpose or the primary function, something like that, that type of wording, you have to know that in the answers is going to be a secondary purpose or a tertiary purpose, right? Something that's in there that maybe makes sense, but it's not the main point of it all. So watch out for those. Those would be your sucker answers. Okay, so we continue with the answers. Describe a culture. Now, it does talk about tradition, and that might have been the better way to go, possibly. But is the purpose to describe a culture? That feels very broad to me. Describe a culture, I mean, you can, have like many volumes of books to describe a culture. In what, 4 lines of a story? I don't think so. Too broad. Now, B, I love B, criticize a tradition. Now, it does say tradition in here, so it's immediately appealing. You're like, oh, okay, it's something about tradition. But was the point to criticize the tradition? Right? Again, we examine every word to determine if an answer is right. I don't think so. I don't think it's about criticizing the tradition. Akira's just thinking, like, if I had done it in a traditional way, would she have been more receptive to me? So it's not about criticizing the tradition. Out goes B. C, question a suggestion. So we go back, and clearly there's a question, because the thing ends with a question mark, right? So there is a question. I like that part. Is the main point to question a suggestion? Has there been a suggestion made? I look at it, I say, there's nobody suggesting anything, right? He's just pondering in his head. So no suggestion, and there we go. We've just gotten rid of A, B, and C. D must be the answer. Even if we don't like D, or even if we're like, I don't know, it's got to be D. Now, if we look at D, it says analyze a reaction. And if after the fact you're thinking, oh, should I have done it differently? Maybe she would have been more open to me. He's analyzing her reaction and thinking, oh, she didn't seem that into me. Maybe I should have done it differently. I don't know. That's analysis of a reaction. So D is, in fact, the answer. All right. I think maybe we do one more, and that's it. We've already done 3, but I kind of want to do something on a different passage. So number 32 is next. So we skip, skip, skip. And here we go. we have the same situation here again. And I'm glad this question came up because this is a bit of a difficult read right here. This is written by Virginia Woolf in 1938, and the languaging can be challenging. Some of it you'll understand, some of it not so much. So again, the first question right off the bat, the main purpose of the passage. So if you read this passage and you don't really understand it, you might not be able to answer this question. So you go on to the next question, right? So let's go to 33. Oh man, what do you know? The central claim of the passage. It's another general question. Again, you have that same problem. So it could be that you skip these questions and answer everything else and then come back to them. Whatever you do, don't actually leave any questions blank ever on the SAT. Right? You fill in everything. Remember, in the introductory video, I said you're going to pick a guess letter. Now, it may be that you don't want to do 32 and 33. That's okay. If you decide not to do them because you don't have a grasp of the passage, fine. Fill in your guess letter. I would circle it on the page. Let's say your guess letter is A. I would circle it A for 32, A for 33, bubble in AA. And you know what? If you had done that, you would have gotten 33 right because A was the answer. But anyway, I just want to get to that because it's really important that you not get intimidated by difficult reading. You just proceed in the fashion that you know, because you're allowed to get a bunch of questions wrong and you'll still get your really good score. So don't worry about it. Don't feel like the whole test is going down the tubes just because you missed the first two questions. All right, I think that is where I'm going to stop. And on our next video, we'll get into, I think it's going to be the last, it's going to be the last couple of types of questions, and we will be done with reading. So I'll catch you soon.